So next we have is environment impact assessment. What is this environment impact assessment? Again, all these issues starts with the context of developed countries and developing countries. When we talk about developed countries, they have everything imbibed in their cultures, in their way of life, way of thinking, and way of respecting the things. Because there's one saying that what nature provided us in lakhs of years, humans took just 250 years to spoil everything. So you can say that how tremendously humans have tarnished the beauty of environment, the serenity of environment, the purity of environment, and what it was giving us for free, now it is being charged, and charged by the humans from the human only. As you have seen in the times of COVID, the fresh oxygen, let's say the oxygen cylinder, when this is the time that oxygen is now concentrated in the cylinders. I'm not talking about the medical aspects, because had nature were not given that, but it is again commercially or industrial oxygen is a different thing. But what I'm taking is that you have air purifiers, you have all the things that can actually clean the environment, like smoke detectors and all those issues. It was not required. Nature never wanted, and that's why nature gave it everything, or gave this all the freebies to the humans for its better survivability and sustainability. What during the past 250 years since industrialization happened in the world's environment started decreasing and downgrading consistently. But the issue in the developed country is not that high, because now they all transfer this burden of taking environment into consideration when it is coming to development on the developing countries, because they are all developed, all the efficiencies they have built up, and now this is the time that they are not ready to share the technology with the developing worlds. They are not ready to share the easy access to fundings to the developing world, and now this is the issue to the developing worlds, that what should they go for environment or development. This is the basic reason of this debate, that development versus environment. And if you give more adherence to the environmental aspect, then development is at stake. And if you are just going for the development, then environment will be reduced. And as the quality of environment is degrading in the developing countries has to bear the burden of that degradation of environment within the scope of health, because the pure health issues will be there. Because like talking about India, the AQI index of Delhi, recorded by the different mechanism of capturing the severity of environment or local atmosphere, it is most severe in the world. And due to that severity, issues like heart attacks, breathing problems, skin problems, water problems, and food related issues, excessive heat, excess of cold, the distracted monsoon patterns and rainfall systems, melting of untimed melting of ice, all these issues are there. And this is why many coastal countries are at the low-lying coastal countries like Maldives, the coastal parts of Mauritius, islands like Seychelles, Madagascar, they all are at the verge of getting extinct from the world map, because the water level is rising due to the untimely melting of snow or big glaciers over the snow cap covered mountains. Now this is the issue. So if we talk about in developing countries, that when we are talking about the development, the parallel issues of accountability towards the environment is also there. This is why this environment impact assessment concept we have majority or majorly working in the developing countries. And here, when especially you are in democracy, there will be pros and there will be cons. So here, those who are supporting development and those who are supporting environment, they will put the equal checks and balance, and this is the outcome of this checks and balance that India has legislated this Environment Impact Assessment resolutions and regulations act in the country, which will assess that what sort of projects will give what type of impacts on the environment, so that we have this planning in advance. We can save the bad impacts in advance, and we can analyze how much the degradation this project is going to be, and so that we can make the provisions of regulating the environment structure back with the same level before the projects are even started. And here the extra cost, extra charges, extra responsibilities are given to the people or the stakeholders who are involved in the development of the project. What will it do? It will add on to their cost, and to add, when it is added over to their cost, then don't you think that the quality will be compromised? And when in country like India, majority of the larger projects are working on the financial institutions like World Bank, IMF, ADB, AIIB. So the money is already expensive because it is coming with the interest. And if the money is already expensive, then do you think that people will be willingly spending that money wisely in the developmental projects? Because they have this extra liabilities of assessing environment and working towards it simultaneously. For example, if you are cutting 1 lakh trees to clear the land for any developmental projects, first you will have the resistance from the pro-environment interest groups and pressure groups like NGOs, like many social workers. So the project lagging us there. So many litigations are filed in the courts before the NJTs and whatsoever, that unnecessarily time consuming. So here the time consumption, the cost enlargement, the delaying outcomes of projects or delivery of projects, all this massively creating a vicious cycle where development remains stagnant, and the issues of environment gives them the equal resistance, volume of resistance, so that the development is ultimately suffered. And who is suffering? The people of the developing countries, who are not only get the opportunities of development, but the impact of environment is so severe because already the developed countries had given that bad effect on the environment, that now the people of poor countries, third world countries, developing countries are bearing over them. So this environment impact assessment, it is nothing but an advanced mechanism that gives you the assessment and the analysis of the projects in terms of impact over the environment, in terms of the regulations, and how we can actually give the precautions and the remedies to the environment as long as the project is sustaining. So this is basically the philosophy behind this environment impact assessment authorities and whatsoever. Now let's just take a brief look at the history of this environment impact, that how did it come into this scope. So if you just see, the need first rose in 1976-77 when the Planning Commission asked the Department of Science and Technology to examine the river valley projects from an environment angle. Because when the river valley projects, they come up with the reservoirs, they come up with the hydropower plants, and they also clear the land so that the flood areas can be extended, because the water is humanly the natural flow is humanly destructed or disturbed. So we have to look at that during the time of any mishappening, how the water and with what capacity and in what direction it could go. So we need massive areas to be cleared. For example, we have to cut jungles. When the jungles are being cut, then the the carbon storage capacity we are getting lost, and here it will be impacting on the availability of fresh oxygen. Then from the this is the flora perspective. Talking about the fauna perspective, the wild animals will be suffering, and if they are suffering, then the prey base will be shifting or be disturbed, and hence the predators will be disturbed. The entire food chain will be disturbed, and it will distract the food web in the long run. Then the people living in the vicinity, they will also be affected. They will also be displaced, as we have seen in the previous video, that how due to the Kaptai Dam developmental project, these Chakma people, those who were the natives of Bangladesh, became the refugees in India, and now they are facing the issues of hatredness, hate crimes, and police atrocities and whatsoever. So this is why environment impact assessment was started, and as on the suggestion of Planning Commission, they asked to Department of Science and Technology that you please analyze or measure the river valley projects from environmental angle too. So that was the first concept in 1976-77, before almost 45 years. Now the first environment impact assessment notification was promulgated by Ministry of Environment and Forest in 1994. And that notification mandated environmental clearance for expansion or modernization of any activity or for setting up new projects listed in Schedule 1 of the same. Right? Now, so what is the statute now? Presently, what is the statute? The environment impact assessment in India, it has a statutory backing. That means it has the parliamentary backing under the Environment Protection Act 1986. So this is basically having the statutory gazetted backing. As you can see on the screen, that India has formal legislation of environment impact assessment. It has been enacted by making an amendment in the Environment Protection Act 1986. So it is basically a statutory backed legislation in India. That means it cannot go without scrutiny. Right? Okay. Now, within this statutory backing, we got an amendment in 2006. During that amendment, what happens is that decentralization of project clearances were given. That means that projects, rather giving them a uniform blanket cover of scrutiny or coverage of scrutiny, we divided the projects so that the scrutiny can be more accurate and the project's vulnerability can be reduced. So what happens? That category A and category B, these divisions were created. Category A for national level appraisals and category B for state level appraisals. Just hear that in the form of a story, you will be understanding. 2006 amendment to the 1986 Act, that divided the projects into two categories, category A for national projects and category B for state level projects. So what category A does, the projects are appraised by Impact Assessment Agency IAA and the Expert Appraisal Committee, that is EAC. What happens in the cases of category B, that are state level appraisal, state level impact assessment authorities and state level expert appraisal committee provides clearance to the category B. So this is basically without having the centralization of this impact assessment procedure, they decentralized it. This is the true feature of federal government in the country, and this is what India is. Though it is quasi-federal or whatsoever, but for the federal structure of the country to be maintained, this is important. Otherwise, the bureaucratic red tapeism, the political hurdles and political inclination over the clearances, that will be disturbed, because what happens when the central government and state government are belonging to different parties, then there is remaining a tussle through the roles of governor, that then governor reserves the projects for the presidential assent under Article 200, and in this way the unnecessary laggings are generally we have been seeing. So this is why state projects can be assessed at state level and central will have the prerogative over the central level. Right now, so how this works, the introduction of this environment impact assessment is generally having four levels. First is screening, second is scoping, third is public hearing, and fourth is appraisal. Right? So in the screening, the project is generally screened at what it is. Then scoping means that how the impact is going to be affecting the environment, what we will be having in terms of carbon releasing, in terms of displacement of the people, in terms of impact on flora and fauna. That is the scoping. Now public hearing, that public the appraisal system, it is that public comments are received and welcomed and requested for, so that people can also contribute according to their knowledge, because the projects are ultimately going to help and they are for the public. So it is basically the true spirit of democracy working in this entire program. And then it is appraisal, that how and what authorities have decided based on the screening, scoping and public views, and keeping everything in line and contribution, what is the final decision over the project, that if it is rejected, and if it is not, then what sort of changes it required in the project finalization. So this is basically 4 system. What happens is, in category A project, the projects require mandatory environment clearance, and thus they do not have to undergo the screening process. Category A projects. And what happens in category B projects? They undergo a screening process and are further classified into B1, mandatorily requiring assessment procedure, and B2, not requiring environment procedures, right? Now, this is in the introduction of different stages. So category A definitely required, and category B, 1 required, 1 not required. Now, what are the projects with mandatory clearance? I'm talking about the 2006 amendment. We have not yet touched the 2020 changes in the rules of the environment impact assessment. So till 2006 it was there that the mandatory clearance will be required. That means the category A project will always remain belonging to the thermal power plants, river valley infrastructure, road, highways, ports, harbors, dams and whatsoever. Industries including very small electroplating or foundry units are mandated to get environment clearance. If you see that whatever I said, if it is for example, the mandatory is for thermal or hydropower plants, river valley projects, then infrastructure, ports, roads, highways, etc., or railway projects, etc. Now, if you see everything that is coming here in this area, it is either contributing to the air pollution, land pollution, because they are also having industries in the coverage, and the flora, the fauna and people, they will all be displaced. So that is where they were given the category A status during the 2006 rules we were talking about. Now coming to 2020 draft notification, that what did it give? What happens is, the draft of EIA notification 2020 came by the given by the Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, with the intention of replacing the existing notification of 2006. In 2020 I'm talking about. In 2020, a draft notification with the intention of replacing the existing, and what was existing? The 2006 one. And the key proposals given in the 2020 were that since environment is directly or indirectly blocking the scope and space, the speed of development in the country, because India is an aspirational country and seeking development is important bit for creating jobs and prosperity, and hence the GDP will be grown, and it is required for bringing the foreign investment in the country, and the overall economic system is dependent on the development of infrastructure and basic economic segments in the country. Therefore, we are bringing these changes to the Environment Impact Assessment 2006. And therefore, what did they do was, the first thing, reduced time for public hearings. So that means the 4 scopes, that is screening, scoping, public hearing and then appraisal. So the third part, the public hearing, the time was reduced. And what happened is that the draft proposed that the notice period for public hearings from 30 days to 20 days, that within 20 days public has to give their views upon the environmental projects. And this, what reasons did they give? That comparing to 2006, 2020 has better connectivity possibilities, existence of mobile and telephony connection between the people, and people are more adherent to the information age. Therefore, the comments and the suggestions can be reached in a short span of time compared to 30 days in 2006. That was the reason given. But is this a justified reason? Because it is about environment. And when it comes to governmental thing, 30 days is nothing. So therefore, it was not a rational intention by the central government during those rules. Now, they also introduced the exemption of projects. Earlier we had category A, 110% environment impact assessment. Then in category B, there were two, mandatory and non-mandatory. But now it is exemption of projects. What did they do? By classifying a number of projects into A, B1, B2. This is what we saw in 2006. Host of projects are exempted from public scrutiny. Number one, you have reduced the time space or time scope for the public comments. Then you have excluded some projects from the public scrutiny. Now, what are the exempted projects? Like the projects like offshore and onshore oil and gas shale exploration. Offshore and onshore, that means on the land and by the water, right? Offshore and onshore. Here, don't you think that the economic and marine ecosystem will be at stake? And those belonging to the fishing communities, those are living in the coastal regions, their views are also important. But the fate and irony in the country is that India's coastal region, especially the east coast part, is not that development. And people are generally least capable of providing their inputs unless some external help in the face of third party like NGOs and other social organizations are coming to their rescue and they are providing the views on their behalf. But since the projects are exempted, so their scope of interaction sitting on the table is reduced and deleted. Now, hydroelectric projects up to 25 megawatt are generally exempted. Now, I'm just giving you the scope of industries as well as their counter remarks, what we can give, the criticism. Hydroelectric projects up to 25 megawatt are also exempted from public scrutiny. That means if you are going beyond 25 megawatt, then the public scrutiny will be invited. Here, seeing the India's geographical or geomorphological situation, in seeing the India seismic zone studies, you see that India is basically an earthquake prone country. Talking about the northern region, we are not talking about the Deccan part, which is relatively more stable, right? But talking about the northern part, which are having more mountains, which are having the more perennial river system, the availability of water is throughout the year. So they are annual in nature, they are not seasonal in nature, and giving to the geomorphological vulnerability of the area, especially the Himalayan region, in the greater Himalayas, middle Himalayas and lower Himalayas, in the western sector and the eastern sector as well. It is expected that these small hydroelectric power plants or projects, smaller ones, are generally feasible for the areas, and those smaller ones are somehow remains around 25, either less or just a bit more. So if maximum of projects, those are coming below 25 megawatt, because 25 is just a small number to see, but when you are seeing it in terms of megawatt, it is massive. So this 25 megawatt, when majority of the projects are coming within this category only or within this limit only, then you are exempting almost 90% of projects from the public scrutiny. So it means it is escaping the one of the scope of public hearing from this draft. Irrigation projects between 2,000 and 10,000 hectares of command area. That means you are talking about the river valley projects. And when in the river basin, you are developing an irrigation projects where new canals are being made, new water barrage system is being made, and they are covering the 2,000 to 10,000 hectares. 10,000 hectares, that means beyond 2 to 3 districts, and then again they are exempted from the public projects. So next is small and medium cement plants. Then because due to the investment factors, due to the land availability factors, and due to the scope of bidders, we are having the smaller level investments coming, because maximum of the people are taking the advantages of MSMEs. And this, when MSME scope is extended, that till what annual returns will annual turnover will be medium and small, medium small marketing enterprises and manufacturing enterprises what we have in the country. The majority of the investments are coming in the smaller scale, and small and medium cement plants equivalent to SMSEs. So here it is basically the exemption is going parallel with the level of investment, and majority of the companies investors are coming within that range only. So that means again the maximum of such cement plants are again exempted, and cement plants are great contributor to the air pollutions. Next, acids other than phosphoric or ammonia or sulfuric acids. So here that means majority of the production based on the acids as the base, chemical base, again exempted. It is not at all good. As MSME in dye and dye intermediaries, bulk drugs, synthetic rubbers, medium-sized paint plants, all those exempted. Again, air pollutants and their discharge in the water pollution will be there. Aerial ropeways and ecologically sensitive areas, specified buildings and whatsoever. If you see that roads that cutting through the forests and dredging of major rivers, or if the entire sensitive projects are going away or beyond the public scrutiny, how can you expect that environment will remain in the same alignment with the scope of development in the country? So it is not a statutory change within the environment scope. It is basically the structural change within the environment scope, where the targets of India going parallel and catching up with the scope of relieving the environment threats in the country, is India will be lagging behind due to these rules and amendments and changes. In this context, now what more has happened? The post-clearance compliances. It implies that once a project gets approved by the concerned authority, the proponent projects are required to adhere to certain rules laid down in the EIA report in order to ensure that no further environment damages takes place. And annual submission of reports was also there. Report prepared solely by project proponents. Submission of the compliance report will be solely prepared by the project proponent itself, which without oversights and review may lead to inaccurate information. So here overall what you see that, and also one more important is post facto clearance. If you are talking about the post facto clearance, that means that the post facto clearance is something that where a project that has been operating without environmental clearance can be regularized or allowed to apply for clearance. That means that after violating all the rules and regulations going against the environmental sanctity, you have established a project, now you can get the approval done. So now the boundaries and scope of regulation given under the Draft Impact Assessment Act in 2006, given under the 1986 Environmental Act, you have excluded almost everything where the development can be scrutinized, well managed, well analyzed, and equally we can give the weightage to environment, because ultimately environment is important for the poor people, because in the extremities of heat, those who can afford, they can get their ACs on, but those who cannot, they will have to remain in those suns, those heat waves, and that is why Indian newspapers are get flooded with those many people have lost their lives due to the excessive heat waves, excessive cold waves, excessive rainfall. These many people were basically dislocated due to the floods, due to the earthquake, due to the landslides and whatsoever, because the proper scrutiny of environment was not there, right? And one more thing, then now you can actually get your project assessed by paying some sort of penalty. So penalty is not the only option. It is the actual scrutiny of the project, because penalty cannot bring back the environment to this original form. This is what we are seeing, especially post-industrial areas since 1750s. Now, what are the issues associated? Now, the floodgates of violations. That means all these issues, that post facto clearances, paying penalty and like get your clearances done and without getting the scope of environmental clearance, many violations will be there, and as many violations be there, as the environmental sanctity will be dredged into negativities. Then this entire structure has strengthened the government and government-backed industrialization, but the rational scrutiny of environment and the public suffering or vulnerability has left in the weakness. This is what has happened. Now, easy clearance for strategic projects. The strategic projects means like where people have no say. And when people have no say in areas like defense and military projects, within that scope, if you attach industries, for example, you are designing a, let's say, some sort of missile in the defense or strategic arena, then whoever people or who all people are making a supply to those projects as different inputs level, so then their impact assessment will also be counted as that they are working for the strategic part, and therefore they will also go without any scrutiny. Now, reduced time, what is given there for the people for the scrutiny, that is reduced time from 30 days to 20 days. It also means that reduced awareness and scope of people's involvement is also reduced, because not all the people are tech savvy, not all the people take part in the scrutiny, and not all the people are readily available to make any opinions or giving any suggestions to the government, because the poor people, those who do not understand the issues and those who do not understand that what projects are going there in the country, because the education level in the country is compromised. So the people who could represent them, those who are able to gather information to make their cases stronger and suggestive enough, they won't get time. Therefore, the poor people, those who are vulnerable, and those who can get the straight punches of these developments in negative context, they are generally out of the ambit of context or discussion. Now, this entire paradigm is also suggesting that India has made herself vulnerable, and India is becoming a nation who is non-conformity to international framework and conventions, because India has been an active participant of the United Nations Conference on Human, Environment and Development in Stockholm in 1972, the Rio Summit in 1992, what we call as Earth Summit, and United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, that is UNFCCC, and the Paris Climate Accord in 2015. So within this entire context, when India has pledged itself that it will adhere to the environmental sensitivity and it will equally contribute to the betterment of the environment, and opposition of cognitive dissonance is generally shown by the India here in this level by making the proposed changes at domestic level policies in context of environment impact assessment. So our dedication, our commitments to the international frameworks is also challenged and compromised, and in the long run, this non-conformity to pledges India has already made in international conventions and agreements, it will weaken India's stance as a global partner or global leader in environmental governance and climate politics. And in this context, India is losing its scope of claiming the permanent space or permanent position in the Security Council of United Nations Security Council or membership. So here the India's image will be distorted, because right now all the policies of yours, those that are directly or indirectly affecting human rights, human existence, peace, law and order, and the connectivity of society, and now one more point is added, that is human life, and everything is under the impacts of environment, within the existence of environment, what country is doing and what all scope in countries are showing, that becomes the sources and scope of funding and investment from the developed countries. But when they see that knowingly or deliberately the policies are changed in such a way that the environment like sensitive factors or components can be compromised or can be sidelined in such a way the country is not sending a positive image at world arena. So in this context, what could be or what can we suggest as reforms? Here we can say that proper time for public consultation, focus on ensuring access to information and awareness among the people, so that the contribution can be shown from the grassroots level to the top of the authority, and then only the real democratic aspirations of the people will be exercised, and world will get a stronger message that all, not just Indian government but Indians, are equally working for the betterment of environment, and the awareness of people are making government to make the policies that are building the environment at stronger level within the Indian subcontinent. Then also, to improve the ease of doing business, government should bring down the average delay of 238 days in granting environmental clearance that emanates from bureaucratic delays and complex laws. So that means that ease of doing business can only be defined when government can, by rejecting or not just rejecting the projects, can also give the suggestions that how well can we integrate the issues well, so that the projects is not cancelled, but the scope can be enlarged through some changes in environments. Now, grow now and sustain later should not be the policy that just anyhow establish the development, because ultimately, as we have seen in Jammu floods, we have seen in Kedarnath floods, we have seen the landslides in Maharashtra, we have seen the heat waves in Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and many other states. We have seen the water shortages in states of Tamil Nadu, we have seen the water shortages in Northeast, we have also seen the water shortages in the coastal belts. We have seen the devastating effects of floods in Chennai recently. All those issues we have to see and fix that, because human life is important. When humans are there, development makes sense. But if development is there and humans are not there, development has no sense. So ultimately it is environment. So the policy should be that against the concept of sustainable development, no development will take place in the country. And if this is the scenario, and this will ensure not just the better life for us but for the generations to come, and that's how India can leave great impressions, great footprints of its philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam by including or bringing the environment as a house, a home in which all the world communities are living, and that is why the house is being built under the sky of environment. Then only India is a strong contender and strong arguer of everything which is working against the humanity and development and whatsoever at world stage. So environment impact assessment, important topic for you, and if you understand the philosophy of this topic, then you can actually tackle all the questions in whatsoever format are given there. And environment is a fast favorite topic of UPSC in prelims and mains as well. So that was all about environment impact assessment. Thank you.